GHS Grand Zoom. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. We're doing today the third of five, a new member benefit of the GHS. Pete is going to give us collecting advice. He's an author, he's written many books, and we're excited that he'll be able to share some of his thoughts. Pete got involved in golf collecting, specifically club collecting, in his youth and training in his education, where he was in Scotland in Dundee. And he continued to research and write about uh, clubs and many things golf related. He has continued to make major contributions to important areas. Pete established and now runs the GHS Newswire. That is our communication tool where we give business communique every month. So look for that. You'll get a constant contact. If you want to know what's going on, some nice pictures and some links to further information. Pete had the vision of taking our annual meeting and expanding it. He and Bob Muir have worked together to create the GHS National Convention. Bob Muir is the chairman. He's also going to be our vice president come the fall. And he and Pete have worked to expand the program. It's going to be magnificent. It's more diverse. It's going to be very interesting. You'll love it. Absolutely. So, Pete, we want to thank you for your contributions in the Newswire and to the new direction we're taking for the Golf Heritage Society's National Convention. And I want to mention the community of Latrobe, where we will play our Hickory event and our classic event on September 30th, Thursday, to kick off. It'll be great. We have the group, and they call themselves Arnie's Amigos. And John Roos Boson is one of the ringleaders of that group, is on this call. If we have time at the end, maybe John will stay on and tell us a few things that the Arnie's Amigos will bring to the table. So I want to say one more thing and we'll get started. We have two more Zoom calls coming up in this summer series. The next one will be 2 weeks from tonight, and it will be Chris Rodell, who has written a book. Arnold Palmer, Homespun Stories of the King. And Chris has accumulated a great number of stories from the folks and families in Latrobe, PA. It's a great read. We will have Chris to answer questions and go into some detail about what it was like to know Mr. Arnold Palmer, who became very close to Chris, and share those stories. And on September 8th, Mr. Putter, Bobby Grace, will entertain you and excite you and welcome you to come to the convention in Pittsburgh on October 1, 2, 3. You'll want to meet Bobby. You want to hear his stories about putters and clubs in general. He's a hoot. He's a wonderful guy. So without further ado, Burns zips it and passes on to Mr. Pete Georgiady, also known as the Czar.
Hey, I want to take a quick minute here to give a shout out. Look at your screen. There's a guy named Les Brown on the call, and he's already eating breakfast tomorrow in Australia. So, Les, thank you for coming. All right, I want to give you some kind of tips and techniques as to being a more educated, a better collector, and hopefully a more successful and happier collector. I'm not going to tell you about values of golf clubs. I'm not going to tell you what kind of clubs to collect. You got to make that up. You got to make your mind up on that yourself. There are three disciplines that I see in being a better collector. One is specialization. The second is you got to do a lot of reading and a lot of research. And the third one is participate. Specialization. I have been a collector for over 44 years. I've been a GHS member for 44 years. I collected for about 4 or 5 years before I found the society. I have switched specializations many times. Good specialization and also a general collection as well. But specializing gives you a couple of real key elements that will set you apart from a lot of other collectors. You can specialize by collecting a certain type of club. I knew a guy that only collected jiggers, for instance. There are collectors of a certain maker of clubs. You know, the most notable was Ralph Livingston with his Stewart collection, but even before Ralph, there was Jim Cooper, who was also always known as Jim Spalding Man Cooper, because he collected only Spaldings. There were collectors like Don Kuncher, the late Don Kuncher, who only collected Minnesota clubs. And those are the areas where you don't have to spend a lot of money to put a nice collection together. And the outcome of being a specialist is that people will remember you. People will find stuff for you. And as you make friends within the society and within the collecting world, you help them with their specializations, they'll help you with your specializations. We need more of that within the society. My brother was, my late brother was a collector of early American Indian artifacts, prehistoric Indian artifacts. And he was in a group, a collectors group, and every one of those guys knew what everybody else collected. And they all helped each other out. And besides that, they all published what they knew. If you look at club collecting, we don't have a lot of people that are publishing their specialty. There are, I don't know, maybe a dozen books out on individual club makers. You probably have maybe 1 or 2 of mine. You probably have Ralph's book. I can give you a list of the others, but you know, those are invaluable to us preserving the history of the game and making collecting more fun. Any questions on specialization?
Hey, Pete.
Yeah.
What was the first specialization that you chose?
At the time that I joined the society, I lived in the city of Chicago. And I started by collecting Chicago area makers. And right now, you know, I've gone through a number of collections, but right now, about the only thing that I'm really, really interested in is iron-headed clubs prior to 1880.
Thank you.
I also collect a couple of different makers. One of them is Angustine. And I have 6 Angustine clubs. They're not easy to find. I find one every 2 years or so. But when I do find them, I get excited. So, as I mentioned, there are only 12 books that I know of, around 12, that are written about individual club makers. There is really a dearth of good information about old golf clubs for collectors. I cut my teeth on Sturkin Henderson's Golf in the Making. And at the time that I joined the society, which was 1978, that was about the only book that we could find on golf history that really was authoritative, well-researched, and well-written. And that still is a good book to have. Reading, you should be reading every article in the Gulf. And if you want to go back and read other articles that were in the first 48 years of the society, you know, the bulletin, the GCS bulletin, is all online on the website. But there's a lot of good reading in that, and you need to go back and check out some of that. Golfiana magazine was published by Bud Duffner in the 1880s and 1980s, and that has some excellent articles. And you'll find issues of that for sale at just about every GHS trade show that comes along. In the last couple of years, I've done some specialty articles on things like metallurgy in iron-headed golf clubs or metal-headed golf clubs, and the different types of alloy that were used, and some of the makers that pioneered that sort of thing. I wrote a piece on sequence numbers, clubs where the makers would stamp a number on as they sold each one. And while they did that, they kept a record of the length of the shaft, the flex of the shaft, the head, the weight of the head, that sort of thing. Sequence numbers. Endorsements. I put out a piece not long ago on the earliest club makers that used their success, I should say, the earliest professional golfers that used their success to sell clubs. J.H. Taylor probably being the first. When you read, and you probably all know this already, be careful of what you read on the internet. There are some very good sites that have good golf history on them about makers and different professionals. But boy, I'll tell you, if you read some of the stuff that's on eBay, it just makes you shake your head and say, that ain't so. So be very careful. Use the libraries when you can. USGA library is an amazing place, and they welcome anybody that wants to come in and do research. Also, you can probably call or email the librarian, and if you have a specific question and you need a specific answer that doesn't take much research, and she can go back and pull one of the books and get it for you, she'll do it. But don't just say, hey, I need all that you can find on Walter Travis, because you'll just get ignored. The auction houses also are not great places to get information. Jeff Ellis tries to do a good job of enumerating what his clubs are, but the other auction houses, they're out to sell stuff, and a lot of times they don't give you much information at all. Be careful what you read there, because sometimes it's not 100% accurate. The list of makers that have books out that are captured in volume form. John Adams' book on the Park family, Jim Cooper's privately published books on Spalding. They were done a long time ago. Jim was not an educated guy. He was a truck driver by trade, but he has a lot of photographs and he's identified a lot of cool stuff. Roger Hill and I wrote the book on George Nickel. Ralph Livingston has the Stewart book. Jack Mishler did the book on Robert Simpson's shop in Carnoustie. Thomas Carruthers' grandson wrote the book on his grandfather, Thomas Carruthers. And Graham Walters did the book on Mills clubs in England. And that's kind of a tidy library. I did the one on the Octolonis, and I did the one on Tom Morris, and the one with Roger on Nickel. And that's really all there is in that ilk. The last thing is participate. And I think you all are aware that one of the best places to get information on clubs and learn more is at the GCS trade fairs. The national meeting is excellent. The regional meetings are good too. They don't have quite as much stuff on the tables, but they will educate you. You also, at a meeting like that, get to talk to other collectors. You'll be surprised what you learn from other people. And my advice is handle as many clubs as you can. The more clubs you see, the smarter you are, especially if you can remember that stuff. And what I would advise is take pictures. Take a camera, take pictures of clubs. You know that I walk through the room taking a lot of pictures. My photo library of golf clubs is probably around 14 or 15,000 pictures. Now, that's not 14 or 15,000 clubs, but some of those clubs, I may have 7, 8, 9 different pictures, 9 different views of a single club. But that's invaluable. And a lot of people, if you've written me and said, hey, what about this, or what can you tell me about that, I'll probably wind up pulling a picture out of my library and sending it to you, saying, is this what you're looking at? I found this stuff not too long ago. You probably can't see it very well, but these are notes, handwritten notes and pictures that I drew in 1980 when I visited Frank Hardison's house for the first time. And he had a room that probably had 800 golf clubs in it. And being a young collector, being a novice collector, I was absolutely overwhelmed. And the stuff that struck my fancy, I took notes. Also, around the same time, I corresponded with a guy in Australia, and you probably know him less, Neil Crafter. And he sent me his notes. And I've put all that stuff into a loose leaf binder. And believe it or not, every once in a while I get it out and I look at it, because you can't remember everything. So, don't be afraid to take notes, and don't be afraid to take pictures and archive those pictures. And the last thing is, don't be afraid to share your knowledge. That is probably the most important thing that I can tell you, is go to a meeting, meet somebody, tell them what you do. They'll probably ask you questions, ask them what they do. You can probably ask them questions too, and get to know them. I know a lot of guys in the society. I know a lot of the guys that specialize. If I find something, I'll either alert them, or if it's not expensive, I'll just buy it and say, hey, you want it? I'll send it to you. It cost me $10 or $15 or whatever. Just think of me next time you buy something. Okay, any other questions? Please.
Pete, this is Bern. I'm going to lead off. I never really knew how you did what you do in terms of that picture taking capacity. How do you catalog that? How does it organize? You only have an hour.
Yeah, I'm still perfecting that methodology, Bern. I've got a number of different files, and about 5 years ago, I started to pull all that stuff together and try and make it in one place. And it just doesn't work that way. For instance, I got a certain set of folders that identify clubs that I've seen at each of the Dayton meetings since 1995. And each of the national meetings that I've attended to. And I name the club, by the maker, so that I can search for those clubs, through the Microsoft search function, but they may be in different folders. I also have, I went full digital in about 2001. And for 20 years, I took pictures with film, in a film camera. And before I retired from work, I took all those paper photographs to work, and I scanned them at work. So I've got one whole folder that's nothing but scanned paper photographs. And then I've got another folder of digital photographs of clubs that I've owned and either still own or have sold at some point. And then I've got a third folder with alphabetical A through Z of clubs that I've taken pictures of that don't belong to me. And whether I've met somebody's house or something like that, I've got that. So, if you use Microsoft Search, you'll find it all eventually. But it's a labor of love to go through all your pictures and convert the file name from, DCS 01625 to Tom Stewart, Mashie Niblick, or something like that. But that's how I've done it. And so at some point, maybe I'll get the big wedge out and merge them all together. But right now, they're in different locations. And my memory hasn't faded too badly. and I'll remember, I saw that club and I saw a club like that in Dayton, and I'll go back in and I'll look at Dayton 04, Dayton 05, Dayton 06, Dayton 07. Eventually I'll find it.
Pete, this is
Thanks for your
Les from
question.
Sydney. I'm fairly new to this area of collecting. Should one keep the clubs that you get in the original condition, or should you try and improve them? For example, I picked up this club that's got a beautiful old grip on it and shows how they made them in 1900. Should I replace that with a new one, or just leave it as it is and try and just clean it up a little bit?
Les, rule number one is the cost of the repair shouldn't exceed the value of the club.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
A grip like that, yeah, I mean, it depends on what the club is and how much you like it and whether you're going to hang it on the wall or not. On a lot of my, pre-1880 clubs, I don't touch them unless there's something hanging off of them, loose whipping or something like that. I'll fix that. But, if there's a warped shaft, I don't bother to mess with it at all. Now, you get up into the 1890s, early 1900s, yeah, if you want to hang it on the wall or put it on display in your house or whatever, you might want to tidy it up a bit. Putting a replacement grip on it is not a big deal. I mean, if you've got a calfskin grip like that that's literally dangling off, you can either attempt to stabilize it, and the trick is put rubber cement underneath there and attach it with rubber cement so that the grip isn't dangling anymore and it's adhering to the listing, or just get a crappy old club that has a real nice grip on it and take the grip off and put it on. Yeah, I'm kind of old school. I don't want to polish the head. I don't want to, if the shaft in the hosel is loose, and you can squirt some epoxy in there, some super glue, and stabilize it that way. Obviously, you'll never be able to hit a golf ball with it if it's loose like that. But if you just want to stabilize it, yeah, I mean, go ahead and do that. But don't polish it. You might want to take a little grime off the shaft with some oil soap, and then put some linseed oil on it. Taking rust off the head, I use sandpaper, and there was an article in the GHS, the golf magazine, about removal of rust, and there were like 10 different ways to remove rust. Nobody said sandpaper. Well, Bob Kuntz showed me how to take rust off with sandpaper or emery paper, and that's what I use. Is usually either 110 or 220 sandpaper. Take the rust off the head. You won't damage it, and then oil it down a little bit. Does that answer your question? And you've got my email, Les. You can write me anytime you have a specific question.
On the chat, there was a question about cataloging and how you might recommend to organize cataloging of your golf club collectibles.
I've got the questions now here. And do you have recommendations about setting up a spreadsheet database for tracking clubs in your collection? I have done that for over 40 years. I have never found one way that works perfectly. I do have an Excel spreadsheet, and that's probably I found the easiest way to work, because you can sort that 100 different ways, sort by the different fields. And to me, the most important things are the maker, if you know who the maker is, the type of club that it is, Massey, Niblick, whatever. If there's a model name on it, or a model line or a model number, record that. You might have a comment line for the condition, and then you record what you paid for it, so that 10 years from now you know that you either overpaid or you underpaid. But I don't know if you need to go into greater detail than that, unless you're a Ralph Livingston who had, 600 different Stewarts and got down into the weeds with loft and lie and club head weight and that sort of thing. And Ralph did a magnificent job of doing that. I'm not sure anybody else cared, except some of the guys that play with Stewart clubs in their Hickory bag. But yeah, I mean, you try and keep track of that stuff. There's another topic that we can talk about at some point, and that is insuring your collection and also maintaining a catalog of your clubs off-site, so that if your house burns down, you've got a record of it in some other place for the insurance company or whatever. But yeah, people come to me regularly, especially since my name was on the website for years, wanting to sell their collection. And the first thing that I'll ask them is, do you have a catalog or do you have an inventory? And they'll say, no. And I'll say, well, you're not going to get very far, because if somebody calls you up and says, what do you got? And you say, well, I got a little of this and a little of that. About 10 seconds later, you're going to hear the phone click. Nobody's got the patience for that. So, keep a record of what you've got. And when it comes time to sell, or when you want to sell stuff, have a list ready and be able to send that out.
I have a question that I've seen on the chat. It relates to storing clubs. There's a display, and then there's storage. We have your favorites on display, but what about the storage requirements? What's the best way and the preferred method to store golf clubs?
I only know one way, Bern, and that's a cardboard box. You can stand them upright, you can lay them down, you can stack those boxes, you can do whatever you want. Hopefully your basement doesn't have too much humidity, or your attic, or whatever room that you're going to store them in. But quite honestly, clubs that were made 100 years ago were pretty strong, pretty stable, and you're not going to damage stuff too badly by just throwing it in a box and putting it away. A very humid basement, very damp basement, is going to cause some of those iron club heads to rust, and you might get a little mildew on the leather. So if you don't have a dehumidifier, you might want to invest in one. But that is a question that gets asked all the time, and the answer really hasn't changed in 40 years.
So the follow-up question is this. Pete Georgiady, with our dear friend Dick McDonough, wrote a book on golf collections of the world. And, the word display, highlight, these things come to mind. Can you say a few things to us about maybe some of your favorites, or some of the most impressive things you've seen, and why, and what caught your eye and your attention? And please share with us a bit of that.
Well, we were in Chicago, about 5-6 years ago, out at Pheasant Run, and Jim McCormick opened up his house, and people that could get down into the loop near North went to see his collection. And he has done an absolutely magnificent job of displaying his collection. Most of us don't have 3 rooms that we can put our stuff in glass cases like Jim does. Bern, going back to what you just asked me, I'm getting my collection whittled down right now to what I want is about 120 really nice clubs that I can pick up and fondle anytime I want. I have in my office, I have an umbrella rack that has room for 16 old irons. And my collection of old irons is probably 60 to 70 strong. And that allows me to pull out 5 or 6 clubs, maybe every 2 months, put them back in the box, and put 5 or 6 new ones out to display. Every time I walk in my office, which is probably 20 or 30 times a day, kind of pat them on the head. And that's what I do. I have had clubs hanging on the wall before. I've had clubs in a standing display case before, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's, your tastes change. Frank Hardison had a super golf room in his house with double-decker display racks and little cabinets for his feather ball collection and that sort of thing. And that was impressive too. At one point, my wife allowed us to have old clubs somewhere in every room in the house, including the dining room. Those days have passed. Okay. She still has her collection. She specializes in children's clubs, child's clubs. And we're down to the creme de la creme now. I've gotten rid of all the McGregor juveniles and Spalding juveniles that I bought for her over the years. And we're down to things like the Forgan Longnose and the A.H. Scott juvenile fork splice head and the Burke midgets. But then again, we're moving on in years and we're trying to keep the good stuff and display the good stuff and just not have the clutter.
It seems to me that we may have Miss K. Georgiady do one of our next specialty calls. Maybe an actor. Yeah, that's great.
Well, those clubs, Byrne, go along with her child's sled collection, her 19th century sled collection, and a few very, very, very old teddy bears and, that sort of thing. So
all great. It's all great.
It's all
Pete,
all good. Yep.
If anybody wants to jump in with a club collection question for Pete, please do. But I was hoping, dying for the opportunity to ask Pete to go way back in his life to when he was in Scotland and talk to us a little bit or a lot about how he got the bug, who he met. Tell some stories. I traveled with Pete. We were in Scotland and we kicked around, and his exuberance was so infectious. Please, Pete.
And I even took Byrne to my old college dorm. And then we went down the road to one of my favorite pubs. That was in Dundee. We did all that in St. Andrews too, but yeah, Byrne, it was a special trip. I love that trip because I took 3 GHS members with me so that we all spoke the language and we all had the same interests. And hey, I was very proud to be able to show those guys a good time. Anyway, I'll tell you how it started. Very quickly. There was an old gentleman that had a licensed grocery, a little grocery store that also was licensed to sell beer and wine and liquor. And he had the type of beer that I really liked, the brown ale. So every Wednesday afternoon, I would go up and get my supply of beer, maybe part of my supply of beer. And he started out our friendship one day. I'd come in there maybe 3 times, and he looks at me and he says, "So you were an American, huh?" And I said, "Well, what gave that away?" And his second question, rapid fire, was, "Well, have you played any of our great golf courses yet?" And I said, "No, but I brought my golf glove. Didn't bring my clubs. That was too much work." And he says, "Well, when you're ready to play, I'll set you up with a kit." So this guy gave me golf clubs to go out and play golf when I was ready to play golf. didn't know my last name. Wouldn't have been too hard to go to the university and say, hey, one of these Americans, because there were only 5 of us there, stole my golf clubs. I'd go get the golf clubs on Wednesday. I'd play golf Thursday afternoon. And on Friday, I'd take the golf clubs back for him so he could play golf. And I'd get my beer supply. Well, fast forward 2-3 years later, I was married, took my wife over there. We went up, spent the day with Doug. He drove us around, just an absolutely great guy. And as we left, and I'll remember this very, very fondly, we're on the train heading back down to London. And on the station platform, he, through the window of the train, gives me a Braid Mills 1915 putter. Well, I didn't know that, I didn't know anything about clubs. I took that club home. I admired it. Aluminum head, wooden shaft, leather grip, had that old club aroma to it. And I started going to flea markets and junk stores in Chicago and the Salvation Army, and I started buying golf clubs. And the next year, we went back and we were going to play golf. Doug and I were going to play golf together because we never had played golf together. And between the time that I landed in London and got to Scotland, he passed away. And he had said, I've got more golf clubs for you. And I never saw him. But that's how I got started. And then I started going to flea markets and going to just going everywhere. And at the time I was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Chicago. At one point, I had 150 golf clubs in my bedroom. And it's all been downhill from there. The guys that I met in Scotland, I've known David Hamilton for over 40 years, Peter Crabtree for almost as long, David Kirkwood, the medalist. I knew Archie Baird very well. When Byrne and I got back from our trip with Brad Baird and Ross Snellings, I said to those guys, that was an epic journey. I mean, we'll never do another one like that. It was fantastic. And I said, I don't care if I ever play golf again, if it's not in Scotland. And I've been over there, 15, 20 times. It's just so much fun. Anyway, anything else? But that's how I got started.
I'm going to reminisce just a little bit. We played the old course, the Jubilee, the new course, and we got up to Carnoustie the year of the Open there. And when he says that it was an epic trip, it was. And one memory that I will hold on to forever was that bar experience that he talked about. And the first time that I needed to visit the men's room, I found myself standing in front of plumbing that was 450 years old. It's still functioning. It was a little overbuilt, but it was the real deal, right, Pete?
That was we called it Menny's. The place nickname was Menny's, but it was the Speedwell Tavern on the Perth Road, and it's one of the most beautiful pubs in Scotland. Most of them are all chrome and plexiglass and all that now these days, but that one still had all the original woodwork and everything, and it was fantastic. Yeah, we did spend a little pub time over there, did we not, Byrne?
They knew that the Americans were coming at 8. Now, I know that there should be a final chapter to this conversation, and it may go a little further than a chapter, but it's important. Pete Georgiady has established something and given to us an event that will be coming on its 25th year soon, called National Hickory Championship. And those of us that have had an old club in our hand, then discovered that some people play with these things, eventually discover that there's a guy who put together a tournament on the oldest golf course in America, where 6 holes were contested for the oldest meadow in America. Pete, tell us how the National Hickory Championship came to be, please.
Well, and again, if I had enough time, I would draw a diagram how everything, just about everything that I've done in my life, golf-wise, I can trace back to my membership in the Golf Collector Society, Golf Heritage Society. And it was Ralph and Roger Hill that discovered Oakhurst. And they told me about it, and I went up there and I actually wrote stories on it twice for different magazines. And one day I'm out there, and I loved it. I loved the concept. And one day I was out playing with Mr. Keller all alone, 9 holes. It took us 3 hours to play because we just would hit the ball, walk a little bit, talk a little bit, stop, hit the ball again, walk a little bit, talk a little bit. Beautiful sunny afternoon. And on the 8th hole, Bern, I looked at him and I said, Mr. Keller, why can't we have a tournament here? He says, well, I don't know. Why can't we? And the whole impetus of that was that he had sets of replica clubs made so that when people came to Oakhurst and played golf, they played with quote unquote 19th century replicas. Well, we experts contested that with him, but he did have long-headed woods and long-head wood putters and that sort of thing. The irons were crap, but the putters were and the woods were good. And my thought was, my whole idea was, we collectors have these clubs in our collection, and we'll hold the Tom Morris Long Nose Club in our hands and wish we could hit it, but we know darn well we're not going to hit it because otherwise it'd be $2,000 down the drain. But here's an opportunity for we collectors to come up to Oakhurst and actually play a competition using these replica clubs, which Louisville Golf hadn't started making at that point, and experience what it was like to hit a gutty ball with a long head wood. And that was the whole premise behind the National Hickory Championship. Well, the first year we had 41 players. He had enough sets for everybody. 3 guys came with authentic clubs: Randy Jensen, Roger Hill, and Don Giboney. I'm sorry, not Roger Hill, Ralph Livingston and Don Giboney. The second year, it was so popular that over the winter, 25 other guys went out and acquired 19th century clubs to play golf with, and showed up with 19th century clubs. And now just about everybody that plays has 19th century clubs that they use. And we're still not up to the point of playing with authentic woods. You can get by with some late 1890s spliced heads, but most of us play with Louisville Golf or similar replica woods. But the 19th century irons, you cannot replicate them. I know Tad's got a set out. They're just not the same as finding a good 19th century iron, making sure that the shaft is properly set in the socket, put a grip on it, and just hit away. But that's how it started, Bern, is we wanted to experience hitting long head woods and gutty balls without ruining our investment.
Pete, there's a lot of fond memories, I know. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about Mr. Keller, and I'd like you to think about a couple fond moments that you have a champion or a competition that might come to mind.
Geez, there was so much good stuff that happened in the first few years of the National Hickory that we put out a book, and it encapsulated the first 14 years. And it was, I did all the fact gathering and put the final results sheets in and that sort of thing. But the body of the book was actually written by the players. and contributing anecdotes. And sometimes it was 2 or 3 sentences. And then, probably the best one of all was from Robin McMillan, who was 30 years at Golf Magazine, and he wrote 4,600 words. All of them just absolutely glowing on his experience there, even though he finished dead last. And in fact, his claim to fame is that he's finished last in both the net division and the gross division. So he's very proud of that. Yeah, I mean, Bern, there are too many great moments. I really don't even know where to begin, except that we're getting fired up for the 25th.
That's great. Pete, I'm going to ask you to commit to a similar publication for that blessed event so that I can tell my story of having an 11 on number 1, and the second time around saying, well, I can't have an 11, and darn it if I didn't get an 11.
Well, the first time I played in the tournament, on number 3, the little par 3 hole, I hit down into the valley of death and took a 12 on that hole. And I thought I was embarrassed until Steve Kamika was right behind me and took a 15 on a par 3. And our number 1 spectator, a guy named William C. Campbell, Billy Campbell, was sitting on the bench. And he said, "Who is that?" And they said, "Well, that's Pete Georgiady, the writer." And he said, "Yeah, hey, that's certainly not Pete Georgiady, the golfer." But he was a great fan of ours, and we miss him greatly.
Great stuff. So I'm hoping that a person or two will jump in for a concluding question. So I'm going to just kind of sit tight for a minute. Yes.
Bern, could I jump in? This is John Russwasson.
Go for it, John.
I just want to say I love the way the society has evolved to so many different interests. But as we're out there recruiting, I'm bumping into people that have either collections or that don't realize the society is out there. And I got to tell a little story because we're going to be having a small little Hickory event at Totter Ridge the day before we go to Latrobe Country Club. Totter Ridge was designed by Reese Jones. Tom and Sue Tanto own a good portion of it. They're the original founders. Tom is renowned for working on golf courses all over the world. His favorite collectible is Linda Hartaugh's artistry. So I'm at Totter Ridge about a week and a half ago, and their superintendent named Brian saw me there, and he yelled to me, called me over, because I think these guys think I'm an expert on Hickory clubs, or we all are experts, where everyone has different knowledge and interest. So he grabs me, he's got to show me this Hickory club he got, and the club was a putter. And the amazing thing with that putter, it had basically Totter Ridge in the actual metal of the putter. And it was so intriguing. We're going to be at Totter Ridge. He got this club, was so proud of it that it has Totter Ridge on the metal, and was asking me questions about it. I said, you've got to sign up, come to the convention, Pete Georgiady. We're going to have so many talented people there. They'll help answer questions at the convention. So I think we all got to be prepared, especially the folks with such unique knowledge. We'll have a lot of maybe new people attending the convention, the trade shows, and being there, that I think we can all try to educate or find answers for. I sure don't know them, but boy, I think, Pete, you can answer so many of the questions.
Well, you know where Totteridge is. It's outside London. It's a course north of London. And Harry Varden was the pro there. Special
Harry Varden, Totteridge, the Winchester store trademark. So often I see some type of stores on these, like the Chicago store. This one says the Winchester store.
Yeah. Winchester Sporting Goods sold golf clubs along with guns and knives and everything else. Well, those are not uncommon, John. We'll find you a bunch if you want to put a set together.
Okay.
Can you guys see that?
Burke.
So
is it Totteridge? Burke Totteridge?
That's a Harry Varden Burke Totteridge.
Yep.
I don't quite know what to do with it. I just acquired this.
Play with it.
I'm a novice at this.
Go out and hit the ball.
I did. I played with it once, and I'm probably not going to hit it again, but this thing's beautiful. It's got the
Sure.
original grip, original shaft. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, Harry Varden made a lot of money endorsing things.
Thank you. I appreciate this call. This is a lot of fun.
And, you know, I entertain emails from just about every member of the society that collects clubs. Sooner or later, somebody will write me and say, I have this. What can you tell me about it? You know, where did this come from? Who is this guy? And I always answer. It may take me a week, but you will get an answer. And it might be quicker if you said, I've got your 8th edition value guide and it's not in there or something like that. But I appreciate all you guys that buy my books. And I'll tell you, in all honesty, that sort of thing has opened a lot of doors for me. I don't get rich doing that. You know, if I did the math, I'd probably be paying myself 50 cents an hour to do that. But that will leave me with one last comment. And that is that everything that I've done in golf pretty much has stemmed from my membership in the GCS GHS. The people that I've met have been enablers. They've helped me do things, go places. You know, I'm a USGA committee person. I'm a member of the Golf Writers Association. You know, all of that stuff happened because I was a GCS member. And the most important thing to me by being a GHS member is sharing the knowledge. And that's what we all need to do, is share our knowledge. We all find stuff out in our own ways. And the more we can share, the better off we'll be as a group.
Hey, Pete, I'd like to add a word if I can.
Certainly, George.
Hey, thank you. I bought all your books and I'm really, really glad I did. A little, if you guys that want to know about the clubs, if you buy the compendium of North American club makers and British club makers, 2 different books, you would identify that Totteridge Club in about a minute. And you don't just, and it's not just for club collectors. Like I collect clubs, but I collect so many other things. And so there's going to be a whole Varden and things he's done, or the Parks, or, you know, clubs made in Musselboro. So you can identify trophies and medals. And I mean, those books are just absolutely I just learned today you've come out with a new trademark book. So, I mean, I'm going to have to run for that. I hope you'll have it at the show.
I'll definitely have it at the show. I wasn't planning on letting people know it was ready, but when Jim Davis sent out the email edition, the digital edition of the magazine to the SOHG today, I got about 20 orders. And I thought, where in the heck are these coming from? But then I figured it out. I've got the books and I'm going to, you know, have stacks of them at Pittsburgh. So if you can wait, good. If not, put money in a shoebox, tie securely, mail me.
Will do.
Thank you.
Hey, Pete and George, when you sell your clubs, do you sell it with the thought of making a profit? Is that part of the intrigue?
No, and John, I should have said that at the beginning of my presentation, that anybody that gets into club collecting with a profit motive is misguided. Yeah, you can if you buy judiciously and sell judiciously, but the whole intent of collecting is you're doing something that you love to do and you love having the clubs around. And you know, I've got a son that I can give my clubs to. My wife doesn't have to worry about selling them off after I get hit by a bus. But yeah, don't think. people say, well, the society had a lot more members at one time, and we did. And a lot of those members were guys that tried to make a living out of selling golf clubs.
In my opinion, it's a fantastic time to buy clubs.
Yeah.
I mean, I've always had clubs and patent clubs and, like Pete, the pre-1880 clubs. But now I am buying every single auction. I'm buying through, couldn't afford 20 years ago.
Right. And the nice thing about collecting is that you can put a real nice collection together that gives you a lot of pleasure, and you can be an expert in a certain area, and you don't have to spend a lot of money. I mean, if you just went out and tried to buy every McGregor popular club there was and be the McGregor popular guy, you wouldn't spend a lot of money. You'd have a lot of clubs. You'd be the knowledge base for McGregor populars, and guys would bring them to you.
In that same vein, at the convention, this will be my first convention I've been to. Will people be selling things from their collection? Is that a big part of displaying what they have, selling it to people that are at the convention?
Definitely. I mean, the trade show is really, it's the draw. It's the draw. Maybe only half the people there will have tables. Maybe only 40% of them will have tables with stuff on for sale. The rest of them will be there shopping. Some of these guys are dealers. Some of them are going to be just guys that are pulling duplicates out of their collection. I probably shouldn't tell you this. I've got a box of $10 clubs ready to go. I've got a box of $20 clubs ready to go. I've got a box of $30 clubs ready to go. And that may be half of what I paid for them. Okay. You've been a good audience. I appreciate it. I hope I haven't put you all to sleep. And as I said, if you got a question, don't hesitate to send me an email. I'm happy to hear from everybody. And that's what makes this a great organization. Back in the day, we had to write letters to each other or send postcards. Now we've got email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Good to see your face at last.
Yeah. Thank you, Les. And we'll talk about next year when I know something. Okay.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. A pleasure meeting with you guys.
Well, tonight, August 11th, 2021, Georgiady was our guest. Pete shared many stories with us. First, he gave us a lesson in his experiences and his recommendations for golf club collecting. He was asked about his experiences in Scotland in his formative years as a student and writer. And of course, it was fun to hear his explanations. So if you haven't seen that part of the video, go back. This is important. This is exciting. And finally, when we collect these items, we discover that some people play with them. And Pete Georgiady found the oldest clubs and the oldest course in America, Oakhurst. And Mr. Keller became his friend, and they rediscovered the golf course and created an event on the oldest golf course in the United States, the Oakhurst Links. And this is today, year 23, and we'll have year 25 back at Oakhurst. But in any case, I want to thank Mr. Georgiady for coming on tonight to educate us about golf clubs, educate us about his journey, tell some stories about display and storage, and also share with us the intimate story of forming and running as the czar the National Hickory Championship. So we're so blessed to have Pete in our family. He's a longtime member, and we look forward to our next Grand Zoom coming up in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much. Take it easy.